example, I knew of three family members who were going to be coming to this earth before their mother knew she was pregnant. I knew the sex, I knew what they looked like, I knew the basic components of their personalities, I knew how they might have characteristics of other family members. So how did I know that? That came to me in a dream, and in a few occurrences, it came in multiple dreams. And so when you have those experiences that are very validating, that you can't really argue with, and you know the feeling of that, you know the components of it, that's what can inform you as you go forward. And then I've had the great benefit of working with lots of people where in real time they've validated what I've picked up on. And quite frankly, it's like getting out of your ego, getting out of it. Hey everyone, this is Emmy Vadnais, and this is your superior self.
Emmy, I don't care that you're a host on another show. That was perfect. Thank you for taking the time. I'm excited that you're here.
Well, it is my honor and pleasure to be here with you, Trey, as well. Thank you for having me.
And you have your beautiful book in the background, Intuitive Development, with a nice big old heart on it. Man, look at that. Ah,
I
how's it?
painted that heart, Trey.
Did you?
I did. It took me about 100 times with the Japanese brush, but I finally got the image of the heart that was in my mind.
How does it feel to write that and to release that out into the world?
It felt like I had a hidden sculpture behind a sheet for about 3 years. And I just knew I needed to get information out to the world because I thought it would help the world. I feel like the more that people listen to their intuition, the better we will all be ourselves personally, and the better we'll be to each other and to the planet. And when it was ready to unveil, it felt like I was actually sending my heart out into the world, and it felt really good. And I was really grateful because I had some people who are well respected in the parapsychology and intuition fields to lend their names to it and give it a nice testimony. So I felt confident when it was finally released to do that.
Mm. And intuition. 10 years ago, would you have used that word?
Oh, well, you are very intuitive because a little over 10 years ago, I did not call myself an intuitive because I was afraid that people would think that I was crazy or that I was a witch, or which, I'll go ahead and
Are
own
you a
those
witch?
labels.
Are you a
Sure,
witch, Emmy?
absolutely. It just means, I mean, to the best I can be. I'm still a work in progress, but I believe it just means wise one, or I'll be in the camp of evolving as a wise, in wisdom, hopefully. But yeah, I think it's a good word because it's really about connecting with the inside, which is primarily, how we experience reality is through our own inner world.
Absolutely. I mean, that's just a word that has this negative context, right? Like even like wizard, right? Like I think at the end of the day, we're all creating our own realities anyway, right? So I mean, isn't that what they do essentially? Is create? Um,
Very well said. I I pretty much agree with you. Whether somebody is overtly aware of that or whether their soul, it's likely that we maybe had some contracts or decisions of why we chose to come here and the challenges we might face, and some of the opportunities to help us along the way.
Contracts. You're speaking my language right now. Talk about your path, right? Like give everyone some context about your background and how you were able to strengthen your intuition.
Yeah. So, well, I'll just briefly say, just to kind of give a
It's a
nod.
long resume. I get
No, just to give
it.
a brief nod to my parents, because I think, my initial conditioned reaction is to say, well, I graduated at this time and did this training, but my father was very open to psychic experiences, to past lives. And so he would talk about that growing up. when my parents divorced, my mother, when I would say something like, "Oh God," she would say, "Oh, I wonder what she would say about that." So she kind of flipped the typical patriarchal way of looking at religion and spirituality. So needless to say, even though the divorce was a painful experience with my parents, it opened me up into other ways of viewing the world. And very briefly, so I'm a licensed occupational therapist, and when I started working, I worked with a lot of people with end of life care needs. And because I was in the Twin Cities, I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota, and there was kind of a saturation of OTs at the time. So I couldn't, at least the first few years of my career, I couldn't work in the hospitals because there were so many OTs, and I just didn't have enough experience to get those jobs. So I love working with more mature people, or people who've been longer on the earth. But I sadly saw them experience like strokes, and I wasn't new to that because I'd worked as a nursing assistant, but I just thought, why do people have to have these heart attacks and have limbs cut off from diabetes and all these different conditions that they go through? And this was before we had the data that we have now, but I just felt that I really wanted to be on the preventative side of healthcare. And one day, a couple of physical therapists came in to talk about energy healing. And I thought, how can you affect somebody positively without physically touching their bodies? And they gave a 2-hour presentation. And I thought, well, wow, the physical therapists are really into the physical world, so there must be something to this. And so I was experiencing symptoms of burnout, which I actually think is probably more accurately in the term I just learned in the last year or two, called moral injury, meaning that I was working in an environment in healthcare where with high productivity standards, and I wasn't able to provide the care to the clients the way I wanted to, because we had to see so many people in a day that I couldn't spend as much time with them and really get into more specifically what gave them meaning and purpose. And so I started experiencing symptoms of anxiety and depression. And so I actually stopped working as an OT, and then I started training in energy healing. And then I met my intuitive teacher because I was so fascinated by intuition, and I had my own experiences like a lot of people do who get into this. And from there, I started taking more holistic training courses and learning how, through meditation and energy healing, that we can access and gain and receive information across space and time without a person verbally speaking. And that just had been proving itself over and over through those energy healing sessions and through the training I did with my intuitive teacher. And I discovered that because I was bringing in a lot of different holistic approaches, I then went back and worked in mainstream healthcare and kind of straddled both worlds for a number of years, and still do in a number of ways, even though I'm in private practice. That intuition was what guided me in my quote unconventional way of going forward in healthcare, when I didn't really have that many mentors guiding me. And so over the years, I've provided sessions with clients and have been able to get information that they didn't put on their health intake form, that I could pick up on how they were feeling and emotions. And I've taught a lot of people how to access their intuition in various ways, but meditation is one of them, and also through intuitive cards, that I quite frankly wish that it was something that was taught more at a younger age for people, because it's just so integral to who we are, that often is kind of conditioned out of us to the point where we can stop trusting ourselves.
There's so much in there that I love, especially about the conditioning and teaching the intuition out of us, right? So those that are listening, right? Like how would you describe or define intuition?
Intuition is your own inner knowing. It's your own inner wisdom. To me, some people might equate it to spirituality or to the true self, the soul. To me, I would also say it's synonymous with love. Now, I don't mean necessarily romantic love, although that could be part of it, but love in that when you are not attached to thoughts and emotions that are just distracting you or detracting you from your true self, then you are able to connect with that knowing within yourself. And for people, it could be a feeling. So we can use all of our senses, and some people might have certain senses that are more strong. Some people can see visions. Some people have dreams. Some people, it's a feeling in their gut. Some people might smell something or taste something, or they might hear messages. And this is where it's kind of gotten where people have disparagingly said that some people are just hearing voices and they're not accurate. But we now know that you can evaluate somebody and how their mental health is on if they're, where that line is. And for some people, it's not always entirely clear, but I do look at it as what is for our highest good and greatest joy, and for really all concerned as well. And it's interesting because I've had an opportunity to talk with various people through being a host myself. And it seems that we may come into Earth and have sort of different plans of how our life could go, sort of like A, B, C, D, E, depending on how much we've learned or kind of gleaned in that moment in life and decisions that we make. And so I think that the highest aspect of intuition would be like the A path. Like if you were totally on with your intuition, you've already learned your lessons, you're just flowing in the flow with that. But maybe if you haven't, you still have some lessons to learn, it might be the B or C path. And I do believe, this is my viewpoint, I do believe that we're here on Earth to learn. So I don't expect people to always kind of take that A path. But I think that as we can continually realign with ourselves, we can say, oh, I really shouldn't have treated that person this way, or maybe I really shouldn't have taken that job, or maybe I really should have done that schooling, or maybe I shouldn't have done that schooling. And over time, what's beautiful about it, it's sort of like getting dialed in on a radio dial so that you don't have that static and noise, and you can hear really clearly. The more that you listen to it, and the more that you get validation of your intuition, the more that you can use it in each present moment, guiding you forward in your life.
So beautifully said. Has there been a moment in your life where you've had to fully dive into your own being, like where you, to your point, you didn't have a lot of mentors, right? And I always hear this expression, the answers are within.
Yeah.
Were you ever tested?
Oh yeah, there was I can think back, several times, but what's coming to mind right now is that there was a time where I was in between romantic relationships. It was actually at the time when I was working at a hospital job as an integrative medicine practitioner here in Minneapolis. And I was really coming into accepting my own gifts and abilities with this. And so there would be weekends where I wouldn't hardly talk to anybody, maybe talk to a family member, but I would sometimes just sit in meditation for 1 to 2 to 3+ hours, a lot of contemplation, and listen, and I would get and receive guidance. There are many tools to help with that. I've used the I Ching, I've used tarot, I've made my own intuitive card decks, a few of them over the years. I have one of mine in my book, and I also feature some others that have been really instrumental, truly in the true sense of the word, to help keep guiding me into that inner knowing. Interestingly, since you've asked, it reminds me of a meditation where I was guided into some tenets that I later learned or read in some spiritual books that I would have not been privy to that information. So I think that speaks to that collective consciousness, or some people call it the Akashic records or the psychosphere. So I think we can all tap into that. I don't know that we're all meant to tap into that all the time, but I think that based on, meaning that I don't think we're meant to like know everything all the time, but I think that we can tap into what's relevant to our lives and those who are immediate to us. And then also I'm just about to interview somebody who introduced the Dalai Lama and Greta Thunberg in their conversation about the climate a couple years ago. And it really reminds me about how we are all interconnected. So even though we might think it's just ourselves or our own insular, maybe few friends and close family members, every decision and choice and thought and action we take impacts everyone.
Mm, absolutely, right? Like that old saying that I hear all the time now, we're all connected, right? Like
Yeah.
somehow, some way, we're all connected. um, I just think intuition, right? Like what is it? How do we sharpen that, right? Like, how do we get more connected? How do we connect with that inner self? What is the higher self? Right? All these questions go through my mind when I speak to you. Like, you're hitting on all these different subjects that I just fire me up. What do you think? Like, when you say you hear your, when you get messages, right? Like, is that coming from your higher self? And if it is, right? Like, what is that higher self?
Yeah, great question. Well, just to answer your first question, there are many ways to tap into your intuition. Well, maybe I'll go ahead and answer
I
the
know there's
higher
like
self
20.
one.
I know there's
Because
20
then I could
questions to
say that because
that.
there's so many ways to connect with your intuition. For me, the higher self is love. That's where I believe we're all connected, and that's how I believe we're all truly bonded and connected in, if you want to call it the universe, or I believe that that's really the oneness, that we are all a part and how we're connected. So I think that phrase of what would love do, is a high ideal to strive toward, but I think that it's something that can guide us. And what happens, so to answer your question about how can we connect with that or sharpen it or refine it or cultivate it, the first answer for me is meditation. Now, meditation, of course, can mean sitting in like a lotus position or a straight back chair or reclining or what have you. But meditation can also come in the form of just being in nature and sitting out and looking at the clouds in the sky and daydreaming. It could be going for a walk in nature. It could be taking a bath or a shower where you're just like you have indicated, we're just going to be present with each other in this conversation. And so we're basically, you and I are in a meditation together of being present with each other. And I believe that we can have, kind of like people talk about yoga on and off the mat. I think we can have meditation on the mat, but something that I'm striving for in my life is to have my life be a walking meditation, to have every moment where I am as fully present as I can be. But there are, past conditionings and certain triggers, if you will, that can get us. But to me, I believe that those aspects are there because we do have learning to do. So it isn't that one is quote bad and one is quote good. I think it's a dance, and that's why I call myself an intuitive healer, because when I work with people, and myself included, it's shoveling out the crap and bringing in the light.
Hmm. Yeah. The good and bad, right? Like we label that from our perspective, from our lenses, right? Like what we think is good and bad from our experience. Can you look at things objectively, right? When you feel those triggers come up in your body, or like when you get triggered in a moment, like because of your experience in meditation and your intuition, like are you better able to look at some type of disruption in your life more objectively?
Definitely. That has grown a lot. There are still some things that get me that I'm still working with, because I'm still here, I'm still learning. So I don't want to sound like my life is quote perfect and I have it all wrapped up in a bow. However, I mentioned about how I was dealing with anxiety and depression many, many years ago, and much of that is much more manageable, but there's still situations that can still trigger that for me. So that's something I'm still working on. But I think that it also breeds compassion in me. And for me, to be able to have those experiences, because I think we all can have those experiences. And it's really being connected or disconnected. And, like, it's lovely to be with you because you're very connected and want to be connected. And there are probably people in your life where it's hard to be around them because they're maybe spinning and over here and not maybe as present. And so,
Well, let me ask this, right? Like, what is that? Why is it that when you're operating, if you want to call it consciousness, or if we're at a certain level of consciousness and we're around other people, what is it that creates that friction?
well, I mean,
Is it
there's
the
a
energy?
term.
Like, is it the differential in energy levels? Is
I
it
was just
like,
gonna say, yeah, I was, yeah, well said. I was just gonna say how I was taught is like energy. Another way to think of it is like vibration. Um, I think a frequency is all those I think are great terms. I don't know that they accurately describe what it is, but I think that that's probably the closest we can get to maybe a similar consciousness. There was somebody years ago, I can't remember the name, where they actually looked at like um, apathy, hate,
oh,
anger, sadness.
Dr. David Hawkins?
Thank you. Power versus force,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. All the way up to love. And so I think that, we all can move in and out of those experiences. And grief is a very normal experience when you lose something or someone, or maybe there's shame or embarrassment around something with yourself but in my experience, love is the greatest healer. Love for ourselves, love to others, love from others is paramount. And I have guided thousands of people into themselves through meditation, through energy healing, through various forms. And a common theme that is there in every case is a lack of self love.
Mm,
And so when we are not able to fully love ourselves, in some cases, even like ourselves, how can we then be present and love somebody else if we're having disharmony within ourselves? And in my opinion, I think most everyone on this planet, pretty much everybody, except for maybe some of those who have come back to help our planet, who are maybe already graduated, we all experience that. And so it's just to have compassion for ourselves and compassion for others. And then in that space, we can connect more with our inner knowing. Because if we are judging, or if we are worrying or ruminating or obsessing, we're not really in that heart-centered place. And so it's continually coming back to that and operating as best we can from that place, but doing it authentically. And that's why in my book I talk about how we need to heal those wounds in order to really allow that ocean of intuition to expand.
sure. Do you teach people to fully embody, right, the body, or do you help them go within the mind and not like the brain, but like the one mind?
Well, we have a physical body, or we're perceived to have a physical body, and the body is really an instrument that does seem to house our consciousness, although it's not the only place our consciousness can reside. So the body can be a way that we can experience intuition. So I would say that I do both, and that I support people on how they access that. And for some people, it is more mental, and for some people, they do have feelings in their bodies. And everyone is unique, I think, with their own gifts and abilities on how they do that.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Like we were having well, it wasn't brief, right? Like I had a fantastic conversation pre-recording, pre-air, and I was talking about the spectrum of consciousness and how it kind of like, what it has something for everyone, right? Like everyone can come and everyone can enjoy these experiences, to each their own, essentially, right? Like I've had conversations with people that have had incredible experiences with UFOs, and I've had incredible experiences with channelers, psychic mediums, everyone near death experiencers, and it's just like, wow. And the funny thing is, it's like a lot of them have been affected positively in the spiritual uh, category, right, from these experiences. And I think to that point, I feel like it's just kind of, it's like the cosmic joke, right? Like we're gonna give you something that's gonna, it's like the cat, right? Like you give it the little string and it's like playing with it and it's always trying to get it, and you know his attention's right there the entire time. I feel like that's what consciousness is doing to us. It's like trying to get our attention and like it plays with us. But as we play with it, we expand and we grow and we learn and we experience. And that kind of opens up the aperture, if you want to call it that, to our consciousness. And as you expand, it allows greater information, more detailed information to come in. It's like being spoon fed by the universe, like intelligence. And it's like when you think you hit the end, guess what? There's more, right? Just waiting for you to come experience it.
Well, right. I mean, it's not only us tapping into it, but we are it. And so not only are we diving into that ocean, if you will, but we are the ocean and we are expanding it. We are our consciousness is creative, and through our creativity and expansion, we are expanding ourselves and literally, I would say, the universe.
How long
One,
did it take you to get to that point? Right. I'm sorry to cut you off,
oh
but
no, go
you're
ahead.
saying something. I don't want to miss this. Like what you just said is very powerful. When did you come to that realization?
Hmm. Well, probably the way that I just said it, probably not in the too distant recent present, but I think that when you settle in enough into meditation, and I some people say go ahead and get an app, or of course you can listen to YouTube videos. I think all of that can be helpful, and people can be self-taught, but I do think it can also be great to have a teacher to help you manage, or navigate's a better word, your inner terrain and things that might come up. And so I would say that I feel like that was probably early on in my journey with studying intuition, because it does feel like you are tapping into the all. And it's really like Dean Radin and others who have studied really the law of attraction. Energy flows where attention goes. And so where you put your focus and attention and you allow that information to come, you will get information. But it depends on your state of consciousness. If you're just like running in the house after maybe running outside, or just, coming back fast from a busy grocery store experience, you're not going to be able to access as much information unless you're really, adept at this, which can happen. And so that's why I'm a fan of, there's a quote in the Tao Te Ching, something like, I'm paraphrasing, can you sit long enough to let the mud settle from the water in the mind until the answer is made clear? So that you're not striving or trying, but you're settling, you're settling, you're settling, and then the information is there. And one of the ways that I help people kind of understand this is that we all have a certain amount of stress or tension, or maybe even in the realm of anxiety, have worry, we need to survive and take care of, maybe have certain responsibilities. And so we can have stress throughout the day. And when we're stressed or highly stressed, in some cases, people can be highly stressed and get flashes of insight that can be like life-saving. There's certainly stories of those. But for a lot of people, it can take them out of their intuition. And so engaging in activities that can induce what's sometimes referred to as like the relaxation response, although some would argue that doesn't fully capture it. But essentially, it's where you're getting into that rest and digest, and you're letting go. You're letting go of trying. You're not trying or striving anymore. You're just being. And when people get into that state, most people enjoy that so much that they want to return to that. And that's why I suggest maybe for some people a meditation teacher, because a lot of people will say, oh, I'm not a good meditator, because when they go to meditate, right, the repressed, suppressed material comes up. Or people have this misconceived notion or myth that we are supposed to stop our thoughts, which is not true, but the thoughts can slow down. We can go into different brainwave states where we can access more of ourselves and the universe.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Can you speak to like an experience that resembles what Maslow describes as a peak experience in your meditation practice?
For me personally, like what would be a peak experience? Oh, sure. I think For me, it's returning back to love. And with that, I mean feeling peace, feeling what people talk about as the oneness. And Dr. Herbert Benson, who coined the term the relaxation response, he found that to be the case, is that most people, one of the experiences they describe when they get into that state, like lowered blood pressure, lowered heart rate, lowered breath rate, that they feel a sense of oneness. And so to me, that is really the peak experience. Of course, there's been countless experiences. So like I was saying, I could hear information, receive information. And I was going to say, there's been countless experience with clients where I will follow my intuition and say something in a session, and they'll say, oh my gosh, like I'll say, oh, I for some reason, I feel like I just want to ask you, have you talked to your aunt lately? And they'll say, oh my gosh, I just talked to my aunt yesterday and I haven't talked to them in 5 years. I mean, that happens over and over in sessions, but it's a bit of risk taking, but it doesn't feel risky to me because I'm trained in it, but also because I've trusted it. When you doubt intuition, just like Jesus said, you sink. When you trust it, you're going to have experiences that open you up to it, and then it will validate you more, and then you will, get that confidence with it. So I was going to mention about some of the peak experiences. I think.
What about you talk about receiving communications, right? Like any like out of body experiences, like into a different reality, like out of body states that Robert Monroe discusses in his books or Thomas A. Campbell discusses in his workshops, like any of those experiences where you are out of your body state and possibly receiving guidance or information from other beings.
Yes, I would say
Check,
that.
check. Yes.
No, I don't. I guess the reason I say it like that is because I think everybody has different experiences with that. The reason why I answer it that way is because my teacher, so when I first started meditating with her, I wanted to just go up into the universe. And she said, no, no. I said, I feel like I want to levitate. Like I feel like I feel like I'm going to rise off the ground. And she said, no, no, stay here in earth. Now, I'm not suggesting that anybody who meditates always has to stay on earth, but she wanted me to stay grounded. And at the same time, absolutely, I've been able to connect on that universal way. And I believe there are a lot of beings out there. It's just who you connect with, and be discerning with whom you connect. And that's true, I think, in all relationships. Or if you are, I've definitely done spirit releasement, or releasement of like entity attachments and things like that with clients. And you just want to well, that that's a method in and of itself, but you
Sure.
you want to be able to discern who you're connecting with, and discern what the energy is that
Well,
you're. Yeah.
to that point, right? Like, how do you how do you discern, right? Like, and like, can you give me an example of an entity that you connected with that you were able to discern, and how you were able to discern who they were
Yeah.
energetically?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that with intuition, one of the best ways to kind of get validation on it is hindsight. Like, not necessarily like, oh, hindsight's 2020, not totally flippant about it,
In
but
the physical reality, yes, right? Like,
right, but meaning like, like you're married, when did you know that she was the one? And then when you look back on other relationships, and maybe you thought somebody else was the one, but over time you realize like, oh, but I didn't pay attention to this, or I did kind of know that, but I kind of overlooked that. Or sometimes we can have blinders on to have certain experiences. And so,
is it intention too, right? Like when you're in those states, let's say you're receiving guidance from an ascended master, right, or something similar to that, someone who's graduated from this plane, right? Like, and you're receiving some powerful information or guidance. Um, how do you discern that information? Is it because how it makes you feel
yeah.
energetically?
Yeah. So yeah, I was just gonna say that using that real world example that for you, like using you or myself, I'm married too, of basically looking back on that knowing and realizing that you've committed your basically your life to this person. That's very incredibly intimate. So there's a lot of discernment that one has to have with that. So yes, it's what are the qualities that this being has that I'm willing to engage with. And so for me, it's wisdom, it's trust, it's love, it's care, it's compassion, warmth. um some will argue, oh, evil spirits or the devil can show up, and what is it, a wolf in sheep's clothing and things like that. And again,
What are your
it's
thoughts
what,
on that? Can they do? I mean, obviously, I think there is a positive and negative energy, right? But
well,
um,
again, I think it's what are the fruits of that experience, of that encounter. So like you being married to your wife, the fruits, you have children, but also what the other fruits, the other creative projects, your state of being when you're with her, the joy in your life, how you enhance each other. And so all of those can help indicate the intention of that being with whom you're communicating. Some will say, oh, it's all, you're just making it up in your mind. And that's where like, validation of certain experiences can help you. For example, I knew of three family members who were going to be coming to this earth before their mother knew she was pregnant. I knew the sex, I knew what they looked like, I knew the basic components of their personalities. I knew how they might have characteristics of other family members. So how did I know that? That came to me in a dream, and in a few occurrences, it came in multiple dreams. And so when you have those experiences that are very validating, that you can't really argue with, and the feeling of that, the components of it, that's what can inform you as you go forward.
hmm.
And then I've had the great benefit of working with lots of people where in real time they've validated what I've picked up on. And quite frankly, it's like getting out of your ego, getting out of attachment, getting out of worry of if you're going to say something, that isn't accurate. And then you just allow, this information to come, and then it validates it. And then I think it strengthens it when you actually act on it.
So three beings came to you in a dream before this individual had them in this physical plane, and you were able to predict their gender and personality types.
Their sex and their personality, what they looked like.
Wow. Like,
I know. And that's what got me to take, and I don't want to sound like, oh, aren't I amazing? That's not, it's more of, that's what got my attention. And I'm like, there's something going on
so
here.
that's validation, right? Like for
That's
you.
what I'm saying. Exactly.
So you were able to trust that knowing more so moving forward in your work.
Right. And I've got the opportunity to interview Bernie Beitman, who is a psychiatrist, who is one of the, if not the main person in the world since Carl Jung, who is studying serendipity, synchronicity, and meaningful coincidences. And he's written a few books on it. And the more that we have these experiences and the more that we talk about them, the more that we act on them, the more that we engage them, the more that we're going to have those experiences. And I feel that they are really, we're just connecting more deeply with our soul and our own knowing. And it's validating that greater connection of which we're all a part.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I see numbers all the time. Do you have those experiences like when you're out and about and you see sequences?
Sometimes I'll see that on like a clock, but certainly people can see like billboards, or they'll hear songs like that they might, if they're like out shopping, or yeah. So what happens with you with your number
So
sequence?
I have been seeing 77, like it was 444. 444 does come into my reality quite a bit, right? But recently it's like 77777 and then 99. It's crazy, right? And triple nine. It's like triple nines and triple sevens and double, like 777 and 99.
Mm-hmm. Have you looked into the numerology of that?
A little bit, but I will Google it, and like, there's 1,000 different pages or millions of pages of like what it means. So it's kind of like, I don't know, but I just keep seeing it, right? Like, I mean, it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And what do you feel it's communicating to you?
I have no idea.
Well, I would encourage you when you, and I know you have a full life like a lot of us, but if you could grab a moment where you could just go sit in the grass or maybe on your lunch break and maybe just kind of contemplate on like, what do you feel that's saying to you? I think you might get some information for yourself.
Sure. And then butterflies too. I'm not a butterfly guy at all, right? Like, I think they're beautiful. I think the process is beautiful in a butterfly, like coming to be one, right? Like from a caterpillar to the process. I think
Yeah.
that's beautiful. I think it's very similar to what we experience spiritually and being a human being, right? Like if you think about it, from a caterpillar crawling in the crap, on their stomachs, and then going into that process of a chrysalis, right? Like that painful process, and then rebirthing ourselves into this beautiful, magnificent creature. I feel like that's very symbolic to where I'm at right now. And I've been seeing a lot of different butterflies, like driving down the highway, right? Like 80 miles an hour. Oh, I should say doing the speed limit on the highway.
Hey, you're a previous train driver, locomotive
Yeah.
driver. Here.
But I'll see them like on the high, like just driving, right? And a butterfly just flying. I'm like, what? And then it's just like they're coming up in my reality where when they shouldn't be in my reality, essentially, right?
Oh,
So
I see what you're saying, like in unusual places. Yeah. Well, and I think you just touched on something that's super can be super profound and helpful with intuition is that it can speak to us in symbols. So sometimes it's direct messages, it's direct knowing, it can come in dreams, flashes of insight. It might be somebody saying two or three different people saying similar messages to you in like maybe a short span of like maybe a week or two. And so you're seeing a lot of butterflies. And then again, it would be, what do butterflies mean to you? Or if you're not sure, some people will look up, search for it online on the meanings of that. But you just described it. And based on our previous conversation, it sounds like, and I agree with you, all humans, I think there's a lot of truth to that, but kind of where you're at in your life, maybe that's representing you in some regard.
sure, I know it is. I know it is. And it's funny because when you were speaking to the Tao Te Ching, right? That metaphor of the mud settling. That's the second time that I've heard that today, right? Like out of nowhere, right? In two separate. I wasn't even in a conversation. I was listening to a podcast, and the
Yeah.
individual was talking about allowing the mud to settle and or the water to settle with the mud, and kind of sitting with what's there. And I associate that with meditation quite a bit, right? Like
Exactly.
staying still and just allow, because I feel that when I can kind of get into those altered states of consciousness, like things settle down and things will come up, and I can become aware of like what it is that are in my blind spots, essentially, right? From my conscious state of being. Like, something may come up from the subconscious that is triggering me, and I can become aware of, right? Being conscious of the unconscious, and then start working in that process of like healing that, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. And I think it's very well said.
That means a lot to me that you say that, right? Because I know how you're so professionally like, well suited in this modality of speaking towards healing, right? Like your opinion matters to me because you have the experience and the education, right? Like you know what you're talking about. Like you've written a book on intuition development,
Mhm.
and to have your support, right? Like anybody support really in this field, I think is important. So I want to thank you for validating that for me, because like, one, I mean, do we really know what we're doing, right? Like to your point that we need mentors sometimes, like a coach, right? Like we go into meditation. Some people don't even really know how to meditate. So we have these headsets, this technology that guides us, but ultimately we can read a book too. But still, I can read a book about push-ups, but I'm not going to get like, pecs if I'm just reading books and not actually doing it, right? So actually applying the practice, right? um but going in can be scary for some if you don't know how, because it's unknown territory for some, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add that, mindfulness is a popular form of meditation. To me, meditation is the overarching umbrella, and mindfulness is one form of meditation. What's nice about mindfulness is that you can practice it seated or about your daily activities, but I think that it's good to have logged some hours just seated doing it first. And I just want to mention something that you said made me think of how the root of mindfulness, John Kabat-Zinn really came up with that term, comes from Vipassana meditation, which is a Buddhist meditation, which means clear seeing, which to me is synonymous with intuition. And you just described that in your experience, where you said when you really settle in, you get into those states, that you can see those blinders. And that's really what it is. And then it's observing those parts of yourself with love and compassion. And as far as people beginning with meditation, I do think it's a good idea to have a teacher, although I know that there are a lot of people who aren't quite comfortable doing that. So I would say that, if you're going to maybe take a yoga class, that's a great kind of entry into it. Or of course, like, I have a lot of free meditations on my YouTube channel. Healing light meditation just came out today on New Thinking Aloud on that YouTube channel. And so I think that we can access that meditation. I think that what I would just encourage people to do is that if you aren't going to work with a teacher, that if you do have uncomfortable thoughts, emotions, repressed material, if you will, come up, that you seek support however you want to do that, whether that's through a mainstream licensed mental health practitioner, or that's through somebody who is a shaman, or whomever you feel could assist you. My intuitive teacher, I don't even know if she has actually a college degree, but she was self-taught. She did get some mentoring through books, and I think she did some training, but she's highly intuitive. And I was just so impressed with her ability to know information without me telling her anything, and seeing her witness or do that with so many other people, that I knew that was who I should train with. Not that I was just about getting information about people. It was really to understand myself and to serve people better. And because I knew that there was more going on here. So I recognize that not everybody's going to want to, start employing, or maybe can't even feel that they can afford working with a meditation teacher. But I think that at some point in your journey, if people are interested in more serious with meditation, I think it's advisable to maybe at some point take like a meditation class or a meditation series. Might be something, if and of course listen to your intuition on that.
Well, let me ask you this, right? Like I keep seeing the heart on your book in the background, right? Like I want to know, I mean, like what fires your heart up, right? Like what work really gets you geared up to go out and be of service?
Suffering, seeing all the suffering that I've seen, suffering in myself, and recognizing the disconnection we all experience, and that we don't have to be so disconnected from what really satisfies us. And that people sometimes strive for things in their life that really aren't going to fill them up. And that if they really connected within, that they could understand their own passions. They could understand meaning and purpose for their lives. They could understand maybe why they have trials and tribulations. They could understand what really will fill them up in life. They could make better decisions on who to be friends with, who to partner with for work or romantic or whatever kind of, business, creative projects or collaborations. We could all do ourselves such a greater service by taking the time to really, like that great philosophical statement of know thyself. The more that we can know ourselves, the better our lives will be. And the better then, because I believe we all have unique gifts. And the more that we can understand our true gifts, the better we can be of service to each other and be valued. like me be valued, you be valued, all of us be valued for our gifts, and feel good about that, so that we can, hold each other up versus tear each other down. And
Mm,
that includes the earth a we are at I don't need to go into the ecological crisis and the eco anxiety that everybody's experiencing right now, but I do believe if if each of us listened to our intuition more, we would be taking care of each other and the earth much more than we are. And there's a lot of good happening. I don't want to sound like there isn't, there's a lot of good out there. But we could be doing so much more in that
sure,
regard.
sure. I can listen to you speak all night, really. I mean, your words are so very powerful, and I can't thank you enough for coming on here, Emmy. How can people connect with you, and where can they buy the book?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. So my website is emmyvadnais.com, emmyvadnais.com. I have a book page on my website. At this point in time, people still can order. I'm still offering copies through me, or you can also find it through Amazon, and it's probably through other locations as well. You could just also Google the title Intuitive Development, my name, and find it that way. So thank you.
Hmm. Thank you, Emmy, for taking the time. This is, man, I love speaking to you. I can't wait to watch some of your episodes of your podcast and your show. Where can they find? Is it on your website too, where they can find those
Yeah, I
episodes?
used to have a podcast called Healing Connections. It's archived now. That's also on my website. But for over a year now, I've had the great honor, incredible life, joy, and privilege to be the co-host with Jeffrey Mishlove on New Thinking Aloud, which is a YouTube channel, and also it's audio on podcast as well.
Amazing. Make sure to subscribe and check her out. She's amazing. You heard it here first. Emmy, thank you for taking the time.
Well, Trey, thank you so much. You asked wonderful questions, and it was not lost on me on how your questions often had the answer within them. So I hope when people, if they listen to this again, to listen for that as well.